Every major customer relationship ran through two people. Every pricing decision went through one guy's head. Every operational call, what gets dispatched, what gets delayed, what gets prioritized, lived in the judgment of a small handful of employees who'd been there for decades. The buyer's first question wasn't about EBITDA. It wasn't about growth potential. It was, what happens when these people leave? The owner didn't have a good answer. Not because he was careless, because he never had to think about it. Those people had always been there. That deal still closed, but the terms changed significantly. More earnout, longer transition, retention bonuses the owner effectively funded himself. He left seven figures on the table, not because of revenue, not because of market conditions, because the business couldn't answer one question. Does this work without specific people? That's what we're talking about today. Not culture, the way most people discuss it. Not morale, not values posters, not team building retreats. Culture, the way buyers experience it. Because this is one of the most common reasons otherwise strong businesses lose leverage the moment diligence starts. Let me start with something we hear in almost every first meeting. We've got a strong team. We hear this from owners of $5 million companies. We hear this from owners of $50 million companies. And what they mean is some version of this. People care. They step up. They know how things really work. And when something breaks, someone fixes it. That feels like culture. And I understand why it does. Because when you're living inside the business, watching people save customers, solve problems, make good calls under pressure, it looks like strength. But here's the uncomfortable truth. That's not culture. That's people compensating for missing structure. There's a difference between a team that performs well because the systems support them and a team that performs well because they've learned to work around the gaps. Most owners can't tell the difference. And they don't need to, as long as the same people stay. Buyers don't assume they will. Let me put it differently. If your best dispatcher quit tomorrow, not retired, just quit, how long before things start breaking? If the answer is immediately, that's not a team problem. That's an architectural problem. And architecture is exactly what buyers are evaluating. I want to be clear about something. Owners don't miss this because they're naive. They miss it because they're close. You know who can be trusted. You know whose judgment is sound. You know who quietly prevents disasters before they happen. That proximity creates confidence, and it should. You built this. But here's what proximity does. It makes the workarounds invisible. When the system falls short, people step in. When decisions aren't clear, someone handles it. When a customer is upset, the right person makes it right. The business survives, sometimes even grows. So the conclusion feels earned. The team is strong. What's actually happening is more subtle. The business is borrowing capacity from its people, judgment context, institutional memory, emotional energy. Think about a fabrication shop where the lead estimator has been there for 20 years. He doesn't use a formula. He looks at a drawing, remembers the last 3 jobs like it, and quotes from his experience. He's fast, he's accurate, and customers love him. Now imagine if he's gone. Not next year, Monday. What does the next person use to quote that job? If the answer is, I don't know, that's not a staffing gap. That's a systems gap wearing a person's name. Now let's step outside the business because buyers don't experience your company the way you do. They don't feel loyalty. They don't know the heroes. They don't trust unwritten rules. They see patterns. They see decisions that escalate unnecessarily. They see standards that shift depending on who's managing. They see outcomes that depend on specific individuals. They see knowledge that isn't documented, portable, or teachable. And then they ask one quiet question. What happens when this changes hands? If the honest answer is it depends on who stays, buyers see risk. Not people risk, structural risk. I'll tell you another story. Different business, same pattern. Equipment rental company, Southeast Louisiana. about 12 million in revenue, solid EBITDA. Owner was ready to retire. Great reputation, long-term contracts, great fleet, but the entire dispatch operation was in the branch manager's head. Which units went where? Which customers got priority? Which operators were reliable? None of it was written down. The buyer's diligence team spent 2 weeks trying to understand the operation. They couldn't replicate it. Not because it was complicated, because it wasn't externalized. The buyer didn't walk away, but they restructured the deal. They required a 2-year transition instead of 6 months, added earn-out provisions tied to key employee retention, and discounted the initial offer by almost 20%. Not because the business was weak, because the knowledge was trapped inside people. That's the buyer lens. They're not evaluating your team. They're evaluating whether the business survives your team. Culture almost never kills a deal outright. It erodes it. And the erosion happens in language most owners don't recognize as culture related. You hear it as, we'll need retention bonuses for key staff. We'd like to use an earn-out structure. We think a longer transition makes sense. Let's be conservative on the multiple. None of those are culture comments on the surface. They're confidence discounts. The buyer is saying without saying, we're not sure this business is transferable. It looks managed, not systematized. And managed businesses get paid less, even when the numbers are strong. Here's the part most owners resist. And I need you to sit down with this for a second. A weak team with strong systems is more valuable than a strong team with weak systems every time. Because systems normalize behavior. They reduce variance. They outlast individuals. They allow someone to leave without the business regressing. Buyers would rather inherit average people inside a predictable machine than exceptional people inside ambiguity. I know that sounds cold, but it's not. It's the math of risk. Exceptional people leave. They retire. They get poached. They burn out. They start their own thing. But systems stay. So what are buyers actually looking for when they evaluate culture? They're not asking if people are happy. They're not checking Glassdoor reviews. They're asking, is behavior predictable? That's it. That's the whole question. Healthy culture, from a buyer's perspective, means decisions don't change under pressure. Standards don't shift depending on which manager is running things. Accountability doesn't require heroics. Authority lives in roles, not relationships. A new leader can step in without chaos. None of that requires special people. It requires structure. When structure is missing, culture compensates. The strong people hold it together. The loyal employees absorb the chaos, and it works until it doesn't. Buyers discount people who compensate for missing systems. They pay a premium for systems that don't need specific people. If you remember one thing from today, make it that. Now here's where it gets tricky, because most owners, when they hear this, respond by investing harder in people, better leaders, more communication, clear values, team dinners, off-site retreats. And none of those are bad, but they're insufficient. Let me break this down. Values without reinforcement or decoration. You can put them on the wall. You can print them on t-shirts. But if there's no mechanism to hold people to them, they're aspirational at best. Communication without authority is noise. If everyone talks but no one has clear ownership of decisions, you get meetings that feel productive but change nothing. Leadership without structure is personality dependent. The great manager runs a tight ship. The mediocre manager doesn't. And the business performs differently depending on who's in the chair. That's not scalable, and it's definitely not transferable. Culture doesn't improve because people care more. It improves because behavior becomes harder to avoid. I know that sounds mechanical, but think about the businesses you admire, the ones that deliver consistently, regardless of who you interact with. That's not magic. That's engineering. Someone built a system that produces consistent behavior, and then the people inside that system rise to it. Here's the simplest diagnostic I can give you. Culture isn't what people believe, it's what they do when three things are true. The founder isn't available. The decision is uncomfortable. No one is watching. If consistency requires the right person to be present, the culture is informal. Informal cultures feel good. They're flexible. They're human. They reward loyalty and judgment. They also don't transfer. And buyers know this, not because they read a book about it, because they've bought businesses where the culture walked out the door 6 months after closing. We've seen it happen to a construction services company. Great culture by every internal measure. People loved working there. Low turnover, high morale. Owner was beloved. Not long after the sale, 4 key people left. Not because the new owners were bad, because the culture was built around the old owner's presence, his relationships, his style. When he left, the culture left with him. If culture can't survive the exit, it's not culture, it's charisma. And charisma doesn't show up on a balance sheet. So where does this leave you? The fix isn't motivational. It's architectural. What buyers want to see is what we call a cultural operating system, a visible, documented way the business produces consistent behavior, regardless of who's in the seats. Not a manifesto, not a workshop, not a retreat, a system. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Here's the first move. Identify 3 decisions in your business that currently require the right person to be involved. Maybe it's pricing. Maybe it's customer escalations. Maybe it's scheduling. Whatever they are, if those decisions break when that person is gone, you've found your cultural risk. Now ask, what would it take to make that decision survive without that specific person? A documented process, a decision matrix, a clear escalation path? Usually it's a lot simpler than you think. The hard part isn't building the system. The hard part is admitting you need one. We talk to business owners every single day who've spent 20 to 30 years building something real. They've sacrificed weekends, missed games, carried risk no one else understood. And when it's time to exit, the difference between getting full value and getting discounted doesn't come down to revenue or EBITDA. It comes down to whether the business can run on a Tuesday without them in the building. Strong teams feel good. Strong systems hold value. And value is what survives an exit.